Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and it's a week. I had a segue, but I completely blacked it out. What are we talking about, Bradley?
We are talking about the Ahsoka novel.
Yes, we're not doing the show because the strikes are still ongoing.
Yeah.
Right now, as we record this, it is August the 16th, and the WGA is currently negotiating with the AMPTP. They're going back and forth. We're not supposed to know what's happening in the room, but we kind of know what's happening in the room. We're bracing for several more weeks of this shit before they even get to SAG-AFTRA, but that's okay, because we have some really fun things planned for this show, particularly in September, which I'm very, very excited for what I'm going to be doing in September. And Bradley's very excited to not have to deal with what I'm going to be doing in September. Alrighty, well, I don't think we have much of an intro. Obviously, we did time this novel relatively appropriately, Bradley.
You know what? I thought if we couldn't cover the show, what a better alternative than to celebrate the spirit of the week and still kind of celebrate the spirit of the character by talking about this book.
Yes, and I also think more people should read this book.
I think you should read this book before you watch the show.
I agree. I'm going to have my criticisms of the book. I don't think it's a perfect work of fiction, but I do think it's one of the better Ahsoka stories. Yeah. And I think that it's a really interesting look into her character in between the events of Order 66 and Rebels happening. Right. So I do think, yes, definitely. It's a very short read. So at time of recording, I just got back from a trip and I took the novel on the plane with me because I was like, I will read this. I have a 4.5 hour flight. I finished it in like 2 hours. It was not a long book to get through. You can definitely get through this in the 2 days between when this episode drops and when the Ahsoka show comes out.
Yeah, I think that's doable for sure.
I think it's doable. I don't know how long the audiobook is, but...
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like pulling it up right now, but...
I also don't feel like pulling it up right now.
I don't think it took me more than 2 weeks, and that was because I listened to only like 20 minutes at a time. You know what I mean? So, that's like a chapter a day, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, because chapters in audiobook average like 20-30 minutes-ish.
Right. So...
Not everybody is me who just blows through these books because he gets to listen to them all day at work, and it's great. Speaking of the audiobook and the novel, before we dive into it, Bradley, would you like some additional information on Ahsoka?
Yes, please.
So Ahsoka is a young adult novel written by E.K. Johnston. It was released on October 11th, 2016. I didn't double check this, but I think this was around the time of the second season of Rebels. It was either while it was airing or right before the second season aired that this actually came out. So this was written to tie into the second season of Rebels, where, spoiler, Ahsoka is a pretty prominent character in that season. E.K. Johnston, who is the author, has written a couple of Star Wars books. I believe this was the first one that she did. She's also written the entire Queen's trilogy, which is, I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head, Queen's Shadow, Queen's Peril, and Queen's Hope. Did I get that right? I think I got that right. I can double check.
I was like, that sounds right to me.
I did, in fact, get that right. Yay! She's also writing the forthcoming Star Wars Crimson Climb. Other books of hers include Etherbound, The Afterwards, and Exit Pursued by a Bear. I haven't read any of these, but those were some titles I found fun that she has also. The audiobook, now, they did something really interesting with the audiobook, Bradley.
Yeah?
Yeah, they actually got a person who owns a fashion label to narrate it. Yeah, it was super
What a choice.
Weird.
Yeah, what a weird choice.
Weird, bizarre choice. To get somebody who founded a clothing manufacturer to be this audiobook reader, but...
Okay, Lucasfilm, I guess, do it.
Okay, Lucasfilm, you certainly made a lot of choices with this one. And no, the audiobook is narrated by Ashley Eckstein. The joke is she's the founder of the clothing manufacturer company Her Universe, which I own several items from. She is also most known as being the voice of Ahsoka Tano in the
Love that.
Clone Wars and Rebels. So that's who narrates this audiobook, which I haven't listened to, but I desperately want to. Both times I've read it, it's been via text.
Yeah, I think it definitely enhances the listening power of this story if you can listen to Ashley Eckstein tell the story in Ahsoka's voice, because it truly is Ahsoka's voice. I mean, we know what she sounds like in the show, and you're just like, the second you hear her speak in the audiobook, you're just kind of like, oh, she's telling us a story. Like, it's amazing.
So I am just now learning that in the short story anthology From a Certain Point of View, which I've mentioned before on this show, that there is a story called By Whatever Sun that Ashley Eckstein actually narrated on the audiobook, and it was written by Eckstein and E.K. Johnston, and it focuses on the character of Miara Larte, who's the younger sister in this book.
Oh, interesting.
I remembered reading the book about Miara, but I didn't listen to the audiobook From a Certain Point of View, so I didn't realize that was Ashley Eckstein. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I really need to revisit From a Certain Point of View.
I guess so.
I need to, because it keeps coming up in these episodes. Well, Bradley, we'll just jump right into it then. What did you think of Ahsoka?
You know, I thought this was a fun little adventure with Ahsoka. It kind of does something interesting, which is I know we know basically all of Ahsoka's story already, which is not hard to do. Right. Dave Filoni made sure that we know just about everything about Ahsoka, and more than
Dave,
we
we
need
know
to
you
know.
like her. We know you like her, Dave. You can stop writing. You can stop. You can stop, Dave. You can stop anytime you want. You can use other characters, Dave. It's fine, Dave.
I mean, I guess, or not.
Or
which
fucking
it
not.
doesn't seem to be planning on doing anytime soon. But no, I thought this was a fun story because it does tell you a part of the story we don't actually know, which is that interim time between she shows up in Rebels and when we last saw her in Clone Wars. Because she does kind of fuck off for a little bit, and we're like, what the hell is she doing while she fucks off? Well, this story tells you pretty much what she does the whole time while she's fucking off.
And I should mention, I forgot to mention during the additional information, this story is based on a brief outline, like a rough outline that was provided to Johnston by Dave Filoni, because I don't think they ever thought they were going to get to tell this story. The same outline was used as the basis for an episode of Tales of the Jedi. I'm gonna try to go as long as possible without mentioning that episode of Tales of the Jedi. You can go back and listen to our coverage of Tales of the Jedi, episode 6, Resolve, for my opinions on that episode.
Yeah.
Favorable.
Yeah, and we did I think we briefly talked about the book in that episode. I don't know if we talked, I don't think we went too into detail of it, but we tried to slightly compare and contrast them in that episode. So if you want to hear that comparison, you can go back and listen to that episode.
It's over there. Yeah. I'm going to try to keep it strictly to the book. Reading the book, I was struck by how much... the book is concerned a lot with, how Ahsoka becomes Fulcrum, but not in the sense of, how she actually takes the job, even though she does at the end, but, mentally where she gets into a place where she's comfortable accepting this role. And one thing that's really interesting to me about what Johnston does with the character is that she portrays Ahsoka as somebody who is constantly thinking about rebellion, constantly thinking of how she can help people, constantly thinking about what she could do. Early on in the book, the very first chapter, she basically skips town to avoid the Empire, and she leaves behind this force sensitive girl that she knew, and she feels really bad about that. So when she's able to go back, she leaps at the chance to she goes immediately back there and is I'm gonna try to help out here. And when she's on Rada, which is the moon, when she first arrives on Rada, it's either a moon or a planet, I can't remember, but when she first arrives on Rada, she's immediately okay, if it comes to it, what can the people here use to protect themselves? She's got that military strategy component still in her brain, but she's also constantly thinking about that. She's also constantly checking herself on that and being maybe it was kind of actually super fucked up that a 14-year-old girl was made to learn military strategy, and this is just how my brain is now. So I liked the look into her character specifically. I liked just the way that the book spends a whole bunch of time delving into like the psychology of Ahsoka and how she gets from point A to point B, I thought was really, really interesting. And also just setting up the idea of like intelligence, the value of intelligence as a military tool, like why it's so important to have a good intelligence network. Like when Bail sends his guys to go get Ahsoka and they don't know what they're doing, and she like knocks them out immediately and would have escaped if R2 hadn't been there. So I think it's really, really interesting what Johnston has done with the character in the book, as well as also like the environments that Ahsoka has been placed in and the characters that she has been placed with. I do think the book has a nasty habit of like bouncing back and forth between different places. Like she goes to, like she's on the one planet, the first planet she's on, I can't remember, leaves, and we assume she's never going to go back, but like all those characters were actually going to be important later on. It's a couple of different things spread out over the entire book, and they don't really collectively tie together until the end. But each group that she's with is an interesting collection of people that she gets to interact with, like Kaden and Miara and the bartender and the crew lead and some of the others that she interacts with. I thought were really interesting, especially on a second read. Would love to see more with these characters.
Yeah, I don't think it would be that hard to do more
It wouldn't
with them. I think it's honestly, even if Ahsoka wasn't a part of the story, you could have these characters continue doing what they're doing or whatever they need to do to tell their side of the story, essentially. And she wouldn't even have to be a part of it, honestly.
Yeah, and I know Miara's gets her short story and from a certain point of view, but that's not enough for me, Lucasfilm Publishing. I need more with some of these characters just to flesh them out, because some of the characters too felt like they were filling roles in the narrative more so than they getting to explore them as characters in their own right. I think really only Kaden, Miara, and Ahsoka really got any sort of like interesting character development. I liked all of the characters, but most of them were kind of filling their roles in the story, with one big exception too, which is Bail Organa is in this and gets some great stuff in this.
I do, yeah. I think the one character I would want something more. I maybe, honestly, they've done like what we just covered Red Blade, they've done a lot with less. So I would say that maybe the little girl could be something moving forward.
Yeah, the farty girl. The farty
right.
girl.
I don't remember her name, but
it starts with an H.
I wanted to call her Ashla, but then I was like, wait a minute,
that's just
Ahsoka's name.
That's Ahsoka's name. Hadala.
Okay.
Hadala
so
is her name.
I think that would be a really good direction to go, is like do obviously a time jump and then have that character have survived at least the Empire, you know what I mean? And then go from there, because then you could still kind of stay in the what we'll call the Mando timeline, what they're trying to do, the post-Republic or whatever
New Republic
timeline. Era. They're trying to develop the New Republic timeline. So I feel like they should start doing novels and stuff in the New Republic timeline, and I think
I also 100% agree with this.
Yeah, I think that would be a great character to do, because we know that she's force sensitive, so it would just be an interesting thing.
I just had the best idea. I love the idea of somebody who's like a merchant who has like latent force sensitivity.
Yeah.
And that's like their thing. Oh, I love that.
Well, I also love the idea of like, if you take this story of this girl, like, she doesn't know she's special, right? And then somehow her force abilities are, they're subdued until some obviously thing happens and awakens her abilities,
I don't think, based on my memory of it, having reread it, I think Ahsoka kind of intimates to some people what's going on with her, but I don't think she ever really gets the chance to sit down and explain, like, here is what the Force is and what you are doing. Like, that's...
Right. I think I don't know if it's her inner dialogue or if she explains it, but she says something along the lines of, like, if as long as she stays, away from the Empire and no one trains her, her powers will just slowly fade away and it won't be an issue later on in life. I feel like I read that, or it's some part of that story.
Yeah, and it's something that's come up in Mando too. Like when she tells Din, it's better to just let Grogu's powers fade. So speaking of Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, as you mentioned earlier, I was going to say, hey, I wonder if we could get maybe a story with the sixth brother, the Inquisitor, in this. We already have. He shows up in Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, and he is in 7 issues of the Darth Vader 2017 run.
Nice.
I swear, Bradley, you and I should just go through the Darth Vader 2017 run at this point.
We basically have at this point.
We've discussed it quite a bit. I'm just saying, let me add that to our list of if the strikes go on for a really long time, break down Darth Vader 2017 by Charles Soule. There's all that Inquisitor content that Bradley wants.
It's, you know what, that's where,
Fallen Order and Darth Vader 2017.
Most of it is there, so.
Yes, please let us know if you want us to do comics. I will bully Bradley into it. No, he's shown up in a couple of different, like, I don't know where he was in Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, though. Like, I don't remember. He must have been sort of a blink and you miss it kind of thing, or maybe he was in one of the sections that's just the Darth Vader comics again.
Yeah, I think when they were talking about the other Inquisitors, like, I except for the part where she fights with the sister, I think they're just like, yeah, they're just there. She just explains like, oh, they're over there, or they're at this event. Yeah, so it's not like super important, but he's definitely at the last scene where they're all drinking or whatever, celebrating or having a mini party.
Okay, yeah.
He's definitely just chilling.
We've gotten a bit with him before. Right. Yeah, it was interesting. I really liked the whole like purifying the kyber crystal thing, because I think this is where it comes from. If I'm remembering correctly, this was how that was established. That's how you get a white lightsaber blade, is you have to purify. And there's very few people with a white lightsaber blade. I can only think of 2 of them off the top of my head, and they're both in the High Republic.
I was like, I can only think of 1, and she's got 2 of them.
Yes. Yep. No, you know who really disappointed me, though, I will say, when I reread it? What's his face? Pilar, the capitalist guy. He gets like 3 or 4 different interludes. He's like the capitalist guy who's the one who basically comes in and comes up with the idea to basically strip farm this planet and leave. He gets like several inner monologues, like chapters where he's just sitting and thinking to himself about how evil he is and how great it is to do capitalism and how he doesn't care about all of the people. And then he gets unceremoniously murdered off screen.
Well,
it doesn't even mention he got murdered by name. It just mentions that he got killed. Like the guy who came up with it got killed. And I'm like, you had this great villain set up and didn't do anything with him.
That's because it's cooler to have the Inquisitor be the villain for 5 seconds.
Yeah, the Inquisitor just kind of takes over villain. Like, this guy is set up to be the main villain, like a Count Vidian type. You don't know who that is because you haven't read A New Dawn, right? Do you even know what A New Dawn is? A New Dawn is the how did Kanan and Hera meet story.
Oh, interesting.
Kanan forms a labor union and kills a capitalist. Ray Sloan is in it. It's really good.
Oh, random.
Yeah. That's where she originated in, actually, was in that novel, and then Chuck Wendig brought her. Well, no, Chuck Wendig brought her back for Aftermath.
Oh,
and then she got put in Squadrons.
Got it.
And then she got mentioned in Phasma. You see, everything ties back to Phasma, Bradley. Everything comes back to that novel.
It really does. The only novel that they need to do something with. That's already perfect, and then doesn't need to be changed at all. No, but yeah, you're right. He's kind of a meh villain, because you're right. He just kind of is gone, and then you're just kind of like, well, what was the point of even introducing him then if we're not going to do anything with him?
If we're not gonna.
He could have just been like not even an off-screen character, but like they could have just talked about him being like a thing, and then he died. You know what I mean? Like as a plot point rather than an actual character.
Well, Johnston sometimes does this. She does this in the Queen's trilogy, Queen's Shadow trilogy. I don't know what to call this trilogy of books. The Padme trilogy, I think, is how it's supposed to be referred to. She does this in the Padme trilogy too, where she'll like jump randomly over to a different character.
Right.
And some of them are really interesting, and some of them are like, I don't know why we're spending our time with this person. Her Maul one sticks out to me really, really hard from Queen's Peril, because she kind of does. I would say this because we're not going to cover the Padme trilogy on this show. I've read all the books. They just aren't for me. I would feel bad giving them like a critique peek just
Right.
because they're not for me. Those books were not written with me in mind. I can enjoy them in that capacity, but I just want to leave them where they are. But she does a really interesting interlude. There's a part in Queen's Peril where it basically does kind of a mini from a certain point of view for the Phantom Menace. There's a Maul interlude where he's like planning out the duel ahead of time, where he's like
Interesting.
walking around and he's determining exactly where he's going to lead the Jedi to separate them. I did really like that a lot in that book. So sometimes it jumps over and it's really interesting and it provides a lot of interesting context. And then sometimes, like with the guy in this one, it's just like these don't really do anything.
Right.
The Six Brother ones are interesting though.
Yeah, I was gonna say they I feel like she should have utilized those chapters or sections for more of the Sixth Brother, because I think his sections are more interesting, because he even gives us glimpses into the whole, infighting thing and competition with the other Inquisitors, because he's kind of like, oh shit, I need to find this Jedi before
Right.
anybody else, because they're gonna fucking try to steal my bounty.
Yeah, there's a bit where he's like frantically searching to be like, does anybody else know about this? Can I get to
Right.
this first? And this may be one of the first times that we'd ever gotten inside an Inquisitor's head like this. I don't know my timeline of releases on books, but I do think this may be the first time we've ever seen an Inquisitor as a POV character, which
Yeah,
is
it definitely.
really interesting.
I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I would say, at least for me, it was. So, I mean, my timeline of reading, I mean, like I read this one first. So, this book before I read Red Blade. So, I mean, that really was, kind of a first glimpse into an Inquisitor story for me. And that's really cool.
Yeah, and we get the Grand Inquisitor at the end of the book.
Right.
Which is fun. Always fun to see the Grand Inquisitor here.
Love to see that guy.
I love to see that guy. I love that that guy turns up in things now. When he showed up, when he was going to be an Obi-Wan Kenobi, I was like, oh yeah, this guy. He's going to chew the scenery, and he, in fact, spent all of Obi-Wan Kenobi chewing the scenery. Loved it. I also think this book has an interesting, looking back on it in the context of Ahsoka and where Ahsoka has gone in sort of The Mandalorian and into Book of Boba Fett and her various appearances there. At time of recording, there's going to be another show, but we haven't seen it, nor can we talk about it yet. But speaking on those, like her journey with those, and then also going back and getting to see her explored in Clone Wars Season 7, because Clone Wars Season 7 was released after this book. So this was one of the first times we had gotten substantial Ahsoka content since the end of the Clone War, when she walked away at the end of Season 5.
Where does this book fit in the timeline of the stories, though, other than just in between Clone Wars and Rebels? Or at least
this is the first
with
year. I do want to touch on that. This is the first year after Order 66. Okay. So we see in the book is complicated in terms of its being able to fit into the chronology. This is probably the hardest to cram in there and have it fit. Because some of the stuff in there works really well, like the transitioning of the clone troopers out and replacing them with the stormtroopers.
Right.
There's a couple of times that it's brought up multiple times, the fact that part of how Ahsoka gets away with what she gets away with is the stormtroopers are not clone troopers. But then there's also some stuff that retroactively hasn't really worked. There's an interlude with Obi-Wan Kenobi, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is meditating and he hears the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. Well, obviously we know that can't have happened anymore, because in Obi-Wan Kenobi the show, which is 10 years later or 9 years after the events of this novel, he says he hasn't been able to hear him.
Got it.
So there's some minor stuff in there. If you're going to read this book, if you're like me, and you like things to at least mostly fit together, and you didn't spend a lot of time making an exhaustive spreadsheet, breaking down chapter by chapter and issue by issue the chronology of the High Republic, and driving yourself insane trying to make it all fit perfectly together because you are mentally ill and you have fixated on that to an insane degree, the High Republic is good, and Bradley's very lucky we're not touching on that yet. If you are the kind of person like I am, this will be a hard book for you to get. You just have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt.
Right.
You just kind of have to make it work in your brain. And I think it is worth making it work in your brain. I think it is worth it purely for the character work with Ahsoka. and for just how good the story does turn out to be at sort of explaining where she's at in the second season of Rebels. I think it is absolutely worth it for that. Also, gay people, a gay person. Look, I'm just happy to have any of them in a Star Wars book. I know the High Republic is spoiling me. I know that Andor is kind of spoiling me. I'm just happy to see gay people. You know, this book does have a explicitly queer character in Caden Larte, who does have a crush on Ahsoka, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Not the first queer character that we had in canon, but one of the first new ones. The first one was Moff Moores from the Lords of the Sith novel, who is complicated. You can listen to my episode on Force Friends Rewatch if you want to hear me talk about the complicated history of one Moff Moores. But yeah, Caden Larde was one of the first, which is why certain TV shows irk me a little bit.
And completely erased.
And that they completely ignored the character. But I promised I wasn't going to go in on that. I promised I was just going to keep this about the book.
You went a decent amount of time before.
I went a decent amount of time. How long did I go raw recording? It's about 31 minutes we've been raw recording. It'll be probably about 25 minutes into the episode.
That's a decent amount of time.
I did well. I think I did.
Episode. Yeah.
I think I did really, really well. I'm really proud of myself, and I deserve a nice dinner to reward myself for having made it 30 minutes into the episode without complaining about Tales of the Jedi.
Right.
Yeah, I think the book is worth reading for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for those of you who may have felt slighted by the episode of Tales of the Jedi, this is a perfect alternate story and or parallel story if you so choose.
I still think you can kind of arguably, you can't reconcile the opening of Tales of the Jedi, but you can kind of reconcile the end. Because Bail doesn't know Ahsoka's alive in this. Like, he doesn't know who the Jedi is that's running around.
That's true.
But I guess you could sort of kind of make the argument that maybe he just didn't know which Jedi it was. You gotta kind of squint on both of them.
I mean, I feel like it would be hard though because she's the only. She's the only Togruta that people, are like, they're like,
there's two, and one of them definitely died.
Right. So
they know Shakti died.
It's
except
kind of like, wait a minute.
Legends, when she didn't die, she died 3 different times. It was really weird. And we will talk about the death of Shakti probably in one of the September episodes that I'm doing.
No, but I think that's probably the only thing that I can't suspend my disbelief on these stories is that, she is such a specific type of alien that is very semi-unique, and there's not a ton running around.
He doesn't see her until she breaks onto the ship, and R2 doesn't erase one of the engineering things. He just knows a Jedi is running around. He doesn't know it's a Togruta. Gotcha. Yeah, he does. I don't think.
No, I just mean like in general, like in the universe, like if someone's like, oh, there's a Jedi in this town, and they report it, it's like, well, what do they look like? You know what I mean? Like it's like obviously it's an alien.
Well, he puts
it together. Human person.
He doesn't put it together directly from reports of Jedi. He's like, there's somebody doing like a lot of do-gooder bullshit in this corner of the galaxy. Must be a Jedi.
I need to look into that.
I can kind of squint and make it work. Part of me wants to go to the Wikipedia article and see how they managed to reconcile that, but part of me also kind of doesn't want to.
Well, yeah, I think you either
headcanons.
I feel like you can have your own headcanon. Although I will say I was recently on I think StarWars.com because they did like a little recap of her story recently, and they
for no particular reason they just
for no particular
random recap of Ahsoka's entire life story.
But they completely exclude this part of the story in that recap because which actually surprisingly they did use all of the animated stuff for this part of this for her story in addition to live action stuff, but they also included the animation, which in history has not always been the case, just because it's like they try to keep the animation separate for some reason, even though it's also canon.
It used to be before Dave Filoni got his hands on most of the live action stuff.
Right.
Like during the sequel era, it was movies were like the top tier, and then the animated stuff just kind of did its own thing.
Right. And then books
And
and comics
then
at the bottom.
books and comics and various things, which was already kind of in defiance of like Disney's sort of mandate when they bought it that no, everything's canon now, everything's equal. You don't have levels of canon anymore. You don't have G canon and L canon and J canon. And I am not shitting you. This was an actual thing.
God.
Like during Legends, you had like levels of canon that you had to say whether something is G canon or E canon or fucking ridiculous nonsense.
That's
like
so silly.
Yeah, fucking yeah. Real thing actually happened. Go look it up. And then gradually that's all started to just break down and we're back to kind of a worse situation because they won't establish like levels of canon. I get it. It's a mythology, not a history. Different versions of the story are different. But also StarWars.com, you are wrong. Like far
I also think it's probably really complicated for them to do that.
To tell whatever marketing person put together that article that they are wrong and don't know Star Wars, you are wrong to exclude this book.
They could have easily just given it an extra paragraph and said like something along the lines of, and at one point in time, Ahsoka did this, and took on an Inquisitor, and that's it. That's like, but maybe they just didn't want to spoil the book. I don't really know how that's any different than spoiling the cartoons, but
I think they were given the animated stuff and they were given the live action stuff, and maybe they weren't given the rest of it.
I think so.
I don't know. Who's to say it?
Well, it may be because somebody's trying to make money by getting people to go somewhere and watch something on a thing that's on a website that pays money if you watch something on that thing.
Well, and like it is irksome, like it is extremely irksome that this book is kind of like being pushed to the side.
Yeah,
like
I have pushed into Legends a little bit.
A little bit. There was a joke that went around when Tales of the Jedi came out that was like this book with the Legends, Gold Legends banner at the top. But I mean, Johnston, I have my criticisms of her as a writer, but she did take the whole thing in stride. The only thing she's really said publicly about the book is that like Dave gave her an outline and then continued developing the character and did his own thing, and there's nothing really more to be said about it. And she's writing another book for them. She's writing a book about Kira for them. Her next Star Wars Crimson Climb is going to be about Kira.
Oh, I like that.
So, I am very excited to get a Kira novel. We'll see if I actually end up liking the Kira novel.
Right.
But I have liked her various appearances in the comics. I thought that was very cool that she showed up in those. Bradley doesn't know any of that.
No.
We just got Bradley to read the books, right? And it is hard. Listeners, it is hard to catch up on the comic. It is fucking difficult. Even if you have the Marvel Unlimited app, it turns into a massive pain in the ass because you have to figure out what order to read them in.
Oh, God, yeah.
Whether you want to go in release order, chronological order, and then you have crossovers. You have fucking, what's it? The fucking vampire one, the one on Vrogan Voss, all of that. Even the early runs, like you have these crossovers, like you have to have read everything up to them to know about them. And I'm just like, it's a pain. It's a pain. Darth Vader 2017 is completely standalone. You can read that beginning to end without knowing anything else. You'll be fine. Also, The High Republic is a comics that you can read. Once again, I am back once again on my promoting the High Republic bullshit. Our friends over at Darkside Divas are actually going through Light of the Jedi right now. They shit on me basically every episode. It's a
You know what? They need to bring you on because clearly you need to get this out of your system. So, Darkside Divas, if you're listening, please invite him on to talk about this shit.
I have been on Divas Unleashed. We will see if that happens again. But if you're one of their patrons, you can see me complaining about their episode in my own little segmented well, not complaining. I actually like their episodes a lot, but I have massively tangented off of the Ahsoka novel. Bradley, do you have any final thoughts on the Ahsoka novel that we have not covered before?
I think I'd just have like a final thought, which is just that, if you really like this character and you want more content from Ahsoka that you don't already get from the TV shows, you definitely should read this novel because it's just a fun story about her. And I definitely recommend audiobooking this just so you can hear Ashley Eckstein talk about, or speak in the voice of Ahsoka again, just from her point of view, in a story. I think it's fucking great. And it's really what we've always kind of wanted from Ahsoka.
My final thought is, if you like the character of Ahsoka and you want to spend time in her head, I recommend to grit your teeth, bite your tongue until it bleeds about the canonical issues of this, and dive into the book. It is well worth it. The story is kind of okay. It's really, for me, where it shines is in its exploration of the thought processes and the mental journey of one Ahsoka Tano. That's where I think the book really excels, and it's really worth getting through just for that. It's very excellent. All right, Bradley. Well, considering that the SAG-AFTRA is still on strike as of recording, what will we be covering next week? Or a better question, where will we be going next week?
I think we're going to take a trip to Black Spire Outpost.
Oh, wonderful. We are going to visit the Black Spire for the novel Black Spire. the second half of the Phasma duology, kind of. She's not really mentioned in it.
Right.
But it does follow up with all the characters.
We still get characters, right.
It follows up with all the characters. So next week, we will be talking about the novel Black Spire. Then we will have, I think, one more book with the two of us. And then we'll be taking a little time. Bradley has some work stuff. He also needs time to maybe read one or two more books.
I know. We're kind of running out of books.
We're kind of running out of Bradley's books.
We've been doing them so quickly now, and it's like, oh crap.
We've been working through our back. We will come up with something. But there will be a 3-week period where I'm going to do something very cool, but I'm not going to say what it is yet. Also, while I have people here, if you are a Legends fan and you are in the Burbank, California area, Legends Con is going on like the first or second weekend in September. I would have to double check. I just purchased my tickets for it. So if you are a fan of Legends and you want to see me, I will be wandering around that convention for the entire weekend.
I guess I'm going to have to make you some merch to wear, because otherwise we need some free advertising. So we need you to wear
Bradley,
something.
Well, Bradley, I was kind of hoping that my massive gay vibes would clue people into who I am.
We just need to get you a sign that says, "Speak to me, please. I host a podcast."
No, see, I was hoping it was the 1-2 punch of my distinctly annoying voice and my incredible homosexual energy will telegraph to people who I am.
Love that.
But yes, if you're in the Burbank, California area, you can check out Legends Con on Twitter. I think it's legends_con. I think it's the username. And get your tickets. I will be at that. Alrighty, well, that's it for Ahsoka the novel. Boy, I love the SEO of releasing the totally unrelated novel episode in the week that maybe certain things premiere.
Certain things, yeah.
Go us using social media to our own advantage. And speaking of social media, Bradley, go ahead and run our social media.
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Send us a message at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Gold Squad Gaze. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post the podcast as well as exclusive content. Please join us next week and every week for more of Gold Squadron Gaze.
Although I did not read it at the time. It took me quite a bit of time to read it, but you can cut that last little section out. I don't know where my brain was going with that. Shit, whoops.